This is Portal. When you cast it, it creates a portal to the town. And normally that would be the end of it. But we play this game called Path of Exile. We're here to break it. This is what happens when I click Portal.
Intangible way. You cannot hide from fate negligence. Patience is a mercy.
Welcome, or if I may, salutations, Exile. This is Cast on Portal, the weirdest build in Path of Exile. The build play is super simple. All you do is literally hold down Portal, and you teleport automatically from pack to pack, trigger a million spells and kill everything, you face tank anything that doesn't one-shot you, you don't have to move, you don't have to aim, you don't have to heal. It's super simple to play. This is a quintessential Path of Exile build. It's got jank, there's complex mechanics, there's unintended interactions, there's downsides turning into upsides, it's got it all. In fact, this build probably shouldn't even exist. But it does. Here we are. Let's get right into it. So what exactly is going on over here? Portal is a skill. Just like any other skill in the game, you can use it. Enmity's Embrace is a ring which makes you take fire damage when you use a skill. So when you use Portal, you take fire damage. Now, the interesting thing, the interaction over here is when you take damage during the initial animation of Portal, it cancels the animation. So basically what happens is I use Portal, it cancels the animation, because I take damage from Enmity's Embrace, and then I can keep holding Portal and it'll keep retrying the animation and keep getting interrupted as soon as I do the animation. Basically, by holding down Portal, you're taking 600 fire damage per server tick. So each server tick, I'm taking the full 600 damage. I learned of this from a Reddit thread, which I will link in the video guide. But that's the core interaction. We use 2 Enmity's Embrace. Each of them catalyzed up to 600 damage, so we take 1200 fire damage each time every server tick, as long as we keep holding down Portal. Now the first problem comes from the fact that Enmity's Embrace has the line reduced fire resistance. So when you got 2 rings, that's over 100% reduced fire resistance, and now you have no way of actually getting any fire resistance. You're going to be stuck at 0% no matter what you do. The second thing is, if I only use 1 Enmity's Embrace and then scale fire res normally up to 75, then we mitigate too much of the self-damage to reliably trigger cast when damage taken. Cast when damage taken, a level 20 cast when damage taken, requires around 2,945 damage to trigger a linked spell. That means we need to take roughly around 3,000 damage to actually trigger a spell. So, if we get 75 fire res, that 600 fire damage is going to go down far too low to actually trigger cast when damage taken. At least not level 21. So we use 2 rings, and they each deal 600 fire damage each for 1200 total. And we can't scale fire resistance at all. So how do we get around this? There's this unique chest called Rat Cage. What this does is it makes you take 100% of fire damage from hits as physical damage. So now we're not taking 1200 fire damage, we're taking 1200 physical damage. But now this introduces a new problem, which is armor and physical damage reduction, like from endurance charges, is going to reduce the incoming damage. And if we get any amount of armor, that's going to break the setup. This is the same reason why, if you're familiar with Ward Loopers, the way they get around it is they don't scale any armor at all, and they just accept the fact that they're going to fall over to any physical damage. In our case, we are actually getting around this downside thanks to this keystone right here, Imbalance Guard. It's a very niche. Most of you guys probably don't know what this does. No one uses this. But in our build, this is perfect. Like, this enables the whole build. Basically, what this does is it sets your maximum damage reduction to 50% and gives you a 100% chance to defend with 200% of armor. The important part is the maximum damage reduction for any damage type is 50%. Note over here, this damage reduction does not apply to stuff like resistances. It's explicitly for damage reduction, so things like endurance charges or flat physical damage reduction and armor. Those are the only ones that matter. Basically, the way this keystone is intended to be used is it basically gives you a slightly better max hit at low levels of armor, but it makes you weaker to getting shotgun because the maximum damage you can reduce is only going to be 50%. So small hits end up dealing more damage, but big hits end up dealing less damage. So in our case, what this does because of this keystone is our maximum damage reduction is 50%. So we can scale armor, we can scale endurance charges, all of the usual stuff as high as we want, and we're guaranteed to take at least 600 physical damage because 300 from each ring. And we can still scale armor normally to help against big hits. That's the first part of the equation. So we're now taking 600 physical damage per server tick, right? Since we're hitting ourselves each server tick, we're taking 600 physical damage. With the way cooldown recovery works for cast when damage taken, if you have 52% increased cooldown recovery, the default 0.25 seconds cooldown goes down to 0.165, which is exactly 5 server ticks. So basically we need to take 3000 damage in 5 server ticks to trigger cast when damage taken. We're taking 600 physical damage per server tick. So in 5 server ticks, we're taking 3000 physical damage. And that's just enough to trigger a level 20 cast point damage taken. That's how we're actually triggering the spells. So that's all the first part. Now, how do we actually mitigate the self-damage? And I'll talk about that in the next section. The first thing you must realize about our build compared to all other cast point damage taken loopers is we get to pick and choose when and how long we take the self-damage, because we only take the self-damage while you're holding down portal. Unlike other cast point damage taken builds like Ward Loop, for example. What this means is you do not need a recovery mechanism for the self-damage while you're not in combat, because you're not going to be clicking portal while there's no enemies nearby. That's the key thing. So you don't need to have permanent Olroth, for example, like Ward Loopers, or have Recoup or any other sort. You only need the recovery for the self-damage while you're in combat. So what exactly is our recovery mechanism in that case? Well, it's Tainted Pact. This infamous amulet is potentially incredibly powerful, but also really difficult to set up. It makes you take heal from chaos damage over time instead of actually losing life to chaos damage, provided you're leeching life. There's a really good video by Sticky Jim. It's like an hour-and-a-half long deep dive into the amulet. I learned everything I needed for this build from that video. Give it a watch. It explains everything you need to know. But back to the actual amulet in this build. The way we're getting all the regen to counteract the self-damage, it comes from Tainted Pact and Golden Rule. Golden Rule reflects any poisons you inflict back onto yourself up to 100, and it also gives you some chaos resistance. With the way damage scaling works in Path of Exile is relative to your life pool. Like, your life pool is going to be somewhere in the thousands, but the poisons you inflict are going to be in the millions. So when you reflect that back onto yourself, that basically becomes millions of HP per second as regeneration. The actual number doesn't matter, but what ends up happening is you're healing your entire life pool multiple times over in a single server tick. So basically, unless something one-shots you, you're healing back to your full health literally the next server tick. That's also why we get around the downside of Imbalanced Guard. Even if small hits hit you and you take like 50% of your health for that, you're instantly back to full health literally the next server tick. So you basically become immune to getting shotgunned as well. Only true one-shots can actually kill you. So that's how we counteract the self-damage from the Enmity's Embrace. Now, there's a lot of hoops to jump around to actually enable Tainted Pact. For starters, we need a source of overleech, so that the leech doesn't fall off when you hit full life. And that comes from a Glorious Vanity, giving us Immortal Ambition. This makes it so that you have overleech even at full life. Your life leech does not drop when you hit full life, and you basically have full life. Permanent leech. Now we actually need a source of leeching from enemies. And this is actually the tricky part. The first thing we have is 15% of damage taken from hits leech as life during effect. This is from the Flask, crafted Flask mod. This helps, but this is not enough. The self-damage from the Enmity's Embrace, it produces a leech, but it's not going to be that long compared to how long you need to counteract the self-poison. The main leech comes from Aziri's Promise, which gives 2% of chaos damage leech as life. Getting like generic damage leech is a surprisingly hard stat to get, and you need to actually get a significant amount of it to get a long enough leech. Aziri's Promise gives 2% of chaos damage, and that's a lot of chaos damage leech as life. And basically what this does is the leeches that you get are long enough to actually last longer than the poisons you reflect onto yourself. And in practice, I'll explain how it happens. Is you go up to a pack, you hold portal, you hit enemies, you leech from them, and it reflects the poison back. That takes care of all the recovery you need. And then by the time the leech runs out, the self-poison also runs out. So it balances out perfectly. It's a little tricky to set up, but once you do, you almost never die to reflected self-poison. that's basically how we enable the whole self-damage looping thing. Again, the only reason we're able to do it is because we control how long and when we take the self-damage. If I were to just, hold portal while there's nothing nearby, I will die to my self-damage. But I just don't do that because I can. I don't have to worry about self-damage otherwise. So that's why our recovery mechanism works. So Tainted Pact takes care of all the damage recovery we need in combat, but we still need some recovery outside combat as well, because if you don't have any recovery, you've taken all the self-damage and then you're at low life before you go to the next pack. You need some way to actually recover life outside combat as well. And that comes from two things. One is in Eternal Blessing Vitality, level 21. That gives a solid amount of life regen. But the second part comes from a Vitality Sublime Vision. This is like the cheapest Sublime Vision out there, like nobody uses this, but regenerate 15% of life over 1 second when you're hit while affected by Vitality. You're hitting yourself every server tick. So it doesn't stack, by the way, you just get one instance of the 15% regen, but then you basically have 15% life regen on command, basically. That combined with Eternal Blessing, Vitality, and you have like the self-leech as well, and you've got a bit of recoup from the Anointed, that gives you enough recovery to deal with any recovery you need while there's nothing nearby. Like let's say between boss immunity phases, for example. So that's also really important. You do want a solution for that. You can't only rely on the in-combat recovery. So yeah, just wanted to add that to the recovery section. Okay, everything I've explained so far is how we actually enable the whole cast when damage taken loop. Now we need to figure out how do we actually scale our damage. There's a few options here. I'll start with what I'm actually using in my build. That's Replica Nebulous. This was changed this league, by the way. It now gives you increased elemental damage per 1% missing resistance up to 450%. Since we're running 2 of the Enmity's Embrace and we cannot get any fire resistance, we're stuck at 0. This is basically free 450% generic increased elemental damage. And you also get like another 80-ish% from the implicit. This basically translates to around 530-ish% increased elemental damage. That's just generic elemental damage. The second half comes from Festering Resentment. This is a new dagger that was introduced this league. This gives generic increased spell damage and generic increased poison damage. But most importantly, it gives you triggered spells poison on hit, so it's 100% chance to poison with any triggered spells, and gives all damage with triggered spells can poison. So all damage poisons. You can use elemental damage to poison as well. With the way damage calculations work in Path of Exile, the hit damage and ailment damage is calculated independently. In our case, we have generic elemental damage and, generic poison and spell damage. What this means is this increased elemental damage, if you're poisoning from an elemental skill, it applies separately to both the hit damage and the poison damage. So this is it's a hybrid poison and hit based build. Like we get half our damage comes from poison, half our damage comes from the hit. And normally this archetype it's never been optimal. It's always suboptimal because hit damage scales with a certain number of stats. Poison damage scales with dot multi, and it's got its own stats. It's very hard to scale both at the same time. But in our case, since it's all generic elemental damage, which applies independently to both the hit and the poison damage, it becomes really efficient, and there's no opportunity cost because you don't need to get any chance to poison. You don't need to worry about what damage type you're dealing. It becomes really efficient. That's the first half. The second half comes from our ascendancy, which is Pathfinder. Pathfinder is just generically really good. Nature's Reprisal, this node right here, makes Wither. Wither is an incredibly powerful debuff. It gives you a good chance to Wither and also 50% increased effect of Withered. That means Withered now applies 9% increased chaos damage taken up to 15 stacks. At maximum stacks, that's enemies take 135% increased damage, which is incredibly powerful. So what that means to take advantage of the Wither, so naturally poison deals chaos damage over time, so it gets full benefit of Wither, but you also want the Wither to apply to your hit damage as well. So what we're doing this league with the new bloodlines is we have the Lycia bloodline, which gives you 50% of elemental damage converted to chaos damage. This is really cool because now you convert half your elemental damage to chaos damage, and now that chaos damage can benefit from the Wither stacks that you're getting from Nature's Reprisal. I'm also converting the remaining 50% of, in my case, fire damage to chaos damage as well, using a Foulborn Red Nightmare right over here. This gives, when you take all these nodes and a couple of tattoos, this gives you 50% fire damage converted to chaos. The other 50% comes from the Ascendancy, and now you have 100% of fire damage converted to chaos as well. So now all our hit damage and all our poison damage is scaled by the Wither that we apply. So Wither becomes a really efficient scaler for the damage we deal. That's a setup which I'm using. You don't have to go with this Replica Nebulous plus Festering Resentment. There's a couple of other options. The classic Ward Loop option is Annihilating Light. That's like the glass cannon setup. Makes all the elemental damage deal triple damage. That's an option. This league there was that new staff, Jikyani's Potential, that gives you a lot of flat lightning damage with instacking. There's Burden of Shadows, which gives you flat chaos damage based on your life. Something really spicy you can do with that, and the Rune Graph that adds a life cost. There's some cool stuff you can do with that, but it seems harder to set up. There's my favorite, which is the Black Cane plus Dark Monarch, which is what I use in my Cast When Stun from last league, if you saw that. That gives a lot of flat added physical damage. So there's a lot of options. You're basically looking for any efficient setup that gives generic damage to all your spells. I just found this to be like the easiest to set up, but there's a lot to be explored in the offensive side. But yeah, that's my basic setup for the offense. Now let's actually talk about what skills we're using and the best way to get around that. So before I start talking about the actual skill setup, I want to talk about our graphs. I'm running two graphs with the implicit mod, 2% increased cooldown recovery for each green skill gem you have. And this is a global cooldown recovery, by the way. So since I have two graphs with that mod, that basically means I get 4% global CDR per green gem that I have. Skill gem specifically. This slightly biases us towards using green spells, which is not necessarily a bad thing because there's a lot of really good ones. There's Detonate Dead, there's Volatile Dead, there's Cremation, there's Unearth and Desecrate if you're going with the Detonate Dead route. There's a couple of good spells. You have a lot of options here. Again, this setup is you're getting generic elemental damage. You can run basically any elemental skills you want. I was running Detonate Dead. I'm currently not running it, but that's certainly a viable option. In my case, what I'm actually doing is I'm stealing the Forbidden Jewels from Deadeye for +2 projectiles, endless munitions. These were surprisingly cheap this league. It's only 6 divines for the pair. So I didn't even consider that because I thought it would be expensive, but they weren't. So what I'm doing instead is I'm going all in on projectile scaling. Now there's a lot of projectile skills that benefit from additional projectiles due to their mechanics, like the shotgunning mechanics, for example. So I'm going in that direction. I'm leaning all in on the projectile scaling. Starting with let's start with the main 6 link over here. I'm actually running 2 spells, Creeping Frost and Ice Spear. Now we're converting fire damage to chaos damage, not cold damage. We only get 50% of conversion for that. But we're also running the cold to fire support. So basically what's happening is Creeping Frost and Ice Spear, 50% gets converted directly to chaos from the Ascendancy, from the bloodline. The remaining 50% gets converted to cold, and you also get some of the cold as additional fire. So like if you treat it as like a fire skill, it's increased base damage. And then 100% of the fire damage gets converted to chaos damage with the bloodline and the Foulborn. So basically both of these also get converted 100% to chaos damage. Creeping Frost and Ice Spear can both shotgun. In different ways, basically. Ice Spear is just, it's a barrage type spell, so like any additional projectiles is just directly more hits. That's just how the skill is built. It's mechanically built in with shotgun. Creeping Frost is interesting. The projectiles cannot shotgun, but when the projectiles end, the explosion that happens, that can shotgun. But the key thing with Creeping Frost is you need at least one pierce. So what happens is the Creeping Frost projectiles pierce through the enemy and then explode right behind the enemy and shotgun like that. So Creeping Frost, you need one pierce, which I'm getting from my glove implicit, to enable the shotgunning. The rest of the supports are like LE Focus, which is just free damage. And again, this applies to both the poison damage and the actual hit damage from the skills. GMP is very efficient as well. The 25% less projectile damage, it applies to the projectile damage, yes, but to the actual dot damage, the poison damage from the skills, it's less projectile damage. So the poisons are still full benefit. So it's a really good support gem. And of course, cast when damage taken. That's our main 6 link. Now, what other skills are we using that also benefit from projectiles? I want to talk about Blazing Salvo. Blazing Salvo is incredible in this build because of its mechanics, especially with return. Let me just show that over here. With the way Blazing Salvo works is it shoots the projectiles and then it brings them back to you, right? So if you're standing right on top of the boss, the outgoing projectiles, all of them, they will hit, and when they return back at your feet and they explode again. So you get incredible shotgunning potential. I've tested this out pretty extensively with self-poison setup in the axe. I have around 10 projectiles with this. I consistently get 20 self-poisons. So I'm pretty much getting all hits. But the important thing is you need to be right on top of bosses to get the perfect shotgunning. Well, that's when the next thing comes in, which is Lightning Warp. This is what actually makes us flicker everywhere. Like, this is what automates the whole movement part. You have cast when damage taken Lightning Warp. What this does is, when you're in the middle of a pack, Lightning Warp will just directly go teleport you onto the enemies. And same thing for bosses. It just makes you hug the bosses. And that means the positioning, it perfectly lines up with the shotgunning you get for Blazing Salvo. Same thing goes for Creeping Frost, by the way. You need to be like... it automatically aims perfectly to get the maximum shotguns. Same thing for Ice Spear as well. So, mechanically, Blazing Salvo is incredibly powerful. Creeping Frost is incredibly powerful. Ice Spear. And again, all of these are spells that benefit from additional projectiles. So, and we have global additional projectiles from Deadeye. It's really powerful. The other spells I'm using is I'm using a Cremation of the Volcano. This is really good as well. Additional projectiles means, well, more projectiles go up. These can also shotgun. And I'm also running Fireball, which technically it can shotgun, but not really. It needs something much more precise than all the other skills. But it's just a generic, like, skill with projectiles, and it's a fire damage skill. So it's good. You don't have to run this. But anyway, yeah, that's the setup. This is my utility links. Cast when damage taken, Sniper's Mark. Sniper Mark is, again, really good for clear. And you're also automating it. So it basically splits all your billion projectiles that you're shooting out. It makes the clear incredible. Despair is our curse of choice. Again, reducing chaos risk is incredibly powerful. And of course, Lightning Warp. That's what makes us flicker. Technically speaking, you could also run Frostblink of Wintry Blast. It's really funny. It makes you flicker even more. Like it's hilarious to see. But in practice, it's like I don't know how efficient it actually is. But it's something it's fun. You should try it out. Throw on get rid of Fireball and put Frostblink of Wintry Blast. These two skills I'm using, you need a manual dodge skill to get out of any big slams, for example. Just having a mobility option is good. And I'm using dash specifically because it's a green skill. And again, I need enough green skills to get enough CDR to hit the 52% breakpoint. This is just it's an empty link. I don't even touch Plague Bearer. I'm literally just using it for 4% CDR. But that's basically what I'm doing here. Portal, you need Portal like separate. It cannot be linked to anything. It can't even go in the dagger because you have cast on block in the dagger. So you basically put it over here. In the cast on block, I actually have a Blood Rage, and this is really cool because one, it's a green skill, it gives me CDR, and cast on block doesn't proc all that often, but let's say in maps, you just need it to proc once and you basically have frenzy charges for the whole map. It's really efficient, and yeah, it's really good. And of course, you're running your Eternal Blessing Vitality as well over here. But yeah, that's our skill gems. You can experiment. I was changing this so frequently until I settled on this finally. If for some reason the jewels get expensive for projectiles, that's perfectly fine. Those are not mandatory at all. You just go with like, Desecrate, Spell Cascade, Firestorm, for example, and then run like a Detonate Dead setup. You can also do Volatile Dead. They look cool. They look cool. They look really cool. So yeah, just give it a shot. Just feel free to switch up. There's probably skills that even I haven't thought about yet, but only important thing is make sure you run enough green skills to hit the 52% CDR. And yeah, that's basically the skill setup I got. Okay, so let's talk about the gearing for this. I just want to start by saying the core pieces of this build, they're all dirt cheap. I was playing this build for like less than 20 divines when I started, like maybe like 10, 15 divines. Rat Cage it's really cheap. I mean, corruption's not mandatory, but of course they're good. Maybe like, let's say 6 linking it as like a divine. Tainted Pact, additional curses, it's nice but not mandatory. It's a 1 alch amulet. Enmity's Embrace, these are like 50C at most. But the important thing is you need the max roll for the take fire damage when you use a skill. I don't know what the supply for that is going to be like, but that's something to keep an eye out on. They might get pricey. You technically you can get away with a little less than the max roll because you're taking 3,000 self damage in 5 server ticks. You need to only take around 2,945. You got to do the math. Just make sure that you take above the 2020 threshold for castman damage taken. Or you can get like a 23 corrupted one as well. That slightly makes it easier. Anyway, besides the point, these are core. These like the Enemy's Embrace, Rat Cage, Tainted Pact, they're all cheap. Make sure you catalyze it. Replica Nebulous and Festering Resentment, these are also pretty cheap. Not super expensive. This is my helmet. Okay, I want to explain why we're using Eber's Unification. It's not mandatory, but it's a cheap 1 alch helmet that you can get corrupted with cooldown recovery rate. That's why I like this one so much. And also the stats it gives you. Elia's extra chaos is really powerful, especially considering we're doing a lot of conversion and stuff. It basically, the more conversion you do, the more efficient the stat becomes. The other thing is Void Gaze is a spell that you trigger when you use a skill, and we're using Portal literally every server tick, so it's incredible uptime. And what Void Gaze does is it makes enemies have minus 20 chaos res. So like think of it as like a mini Despair. With Despair and Void Gaze, it's like you're getting like minus 50 chaos res on enemies, which is incredibly powerful considering you're scaling Wither to the moon. It's a really powerful helmet for how cheap it is, but it's not mandatory. If you can't find one with a good CDR roll on it, there's another option, which is you can run a Shaper helmet with Tides of Time. That's 2 Shaper items, and you can get a Bound by Destiny, which gives 20% CDR. So you can use that to get some CDR as well if you don't want to go for this route. Like the Shaper helm is also good because you can get like good multi-link. This is what I was trying to do when I was using my Detonate Dead setup. Like this is a good setup for Detonate Dead. Anyway, the other CDR I'm getting is from a belt. I got really lucky with this build. Yeah, it gives me a lot of life and it sustains my flasks, and I craft 12% CDR over there. So I get another 12% CDR from there. Um, the life roll is a luxury. But the important thing is you want to have enough flask charges in here to sustain your flasks, and you want to get CDR as well crafted. The only two flasks that you need like 100% uptime are these two. The one with the leech and the one with chance to avoid being shocked for Storm Shroud. The other ones you don't need permanent uptime, but it really helps. Um, I'll get to that when I talk about flasks. But anyway, that's the belt. Boots are just generic life, resistance, movement speed, suppress. I just want to say we are very starved on int, so like you want to get int on your boots and your gloves. The implicits are important. 8% CDR I have. That basically puts me exactly at 52% CDR. Sap Ground is also really powerful because it's one of the few ways to actually scale your max hit. And you have perfect uptime because you're literally on top of the enemies. So that's just enemies deal 6% less damage. You have 100% uptime on it. Really powerful. Gloves. Again, similar story to the boots. You want life, int, suppress, and some resistance. You want the projectiles pierce an additional target to enable the shotgunning for creeping frost. That is important. And the other implicit you can just get like chaos dot multi, for example. That's the gearing. It's a lot of uniques. So you kind of need to get a little creative on how you get your resists and everything. Feel free to use tattoos on your tree as well to fix whatever holes you have. But yeah, that's the gear. I want to talk about the flasks as well, now that we're here. Sapphire and Topaz flask, that's how you get your resistances. You want the reduced duration, increased effect. One of them you want to craft the self-damage life leech. The other one you want like chance to avoid being shocked. This is important because it's what enables Storm Shroud. Storm Shroud basically gives you 100% chance to avoid all ailments based on your chance to avoid being shocked. That gives you ailment immunity basically. Quicksilver, of course, just get a good one. Consider getting like increased evasion or increased armor on it. Progenesis. Okay, let's talk Progenesis. This is the final upgrade for the build in most cases. Like, this is the most expensive part of the build. It is not mandatory. I want to reiterate, it is not mandatory. In fact, I had written almost my entire guide and was ready to make the video without Progenesis, and then I dropped a mirror shard and I was like, okay, I just have enough to buy a Progenesis. It's really good. It's really powerful. If you have the budget, you should run it, but it works perfectly fine without it. You can run like Witchfire Brew instead over here if you want. That basically frees up a Gems Locket for Despair. But yeah, that's Progenesis. It's really good. Get one if you can afford it. Aziri's Promise. This, you're not going to realize how important this is until you play without it. When I swapped over to Progenesis and I dropped Aziri's, I kept dying all the time to self-poison. That's when I realized how important the 2% chaos damage Leech's life is. That single mod carries the whole flask. But at the same time, the increased elemental damage as extra chaos is also incredibly powerful considering all the conversion shenanigans that's going on. It's really good damage. It's really good utility. It seems kind of cringe to run 2 Amethyst flasks, but trust me, it's really good. And besides, you also don't have a much better flask to run anyway. Due to the way Imbalance Guard works, armor and, well, evasion indirectly, don't actually scale up your max hit because the maximum damage you can negate is going to be 50% of your life. Even if you had like 1 billion armor, for example, and you're taking like a $50,000 damage fizz hit, you're still going to take 25,000 damage. So that's going to still one-shot you because of Imbalance Guard. So even armor, it only scales to a certain extent. After that, armor does literally nothing for you. Anyway, besides the point, what I'm saying is the opportunity cost for running an extra flask is not as high as you might think. So this is not negotiable. Get this. That takes care of the flasks. And yeah, we'll talk about the tree in the next section. Okay, so let's talk about the tree. Let's start with the Ascendancy at first. We briefly touched on it before, but we're running a Pathfinder. We're taking the Wither node. This is really powerful because it scales our hit damage and our poison damage, so it's really efficient damage scaler. We take Nature's Adrenaline. This sustains our flasks. Again, we need permanent flasks for the self-leech mod and the storm shard, and just in general, like permanent flasks is incredibly powerful. For the last Ascendancy over here, we're actually taking Nature's Boon. We are not taking Master Toxicist. And my reasoning for this, there's two reasons for this. Firstly, Master Toxicist, the poison prolif, seems to mess with the reflected poison duration. Like, I find myself dying much more often to reflected poison. I think the poison, the duration resets when the poison prolifs. So that kind of messes with that. So it's kind of annoying. And secondly, this node only affects your poison damage. And again, we're kind of like a hybrid hit and poison build. So like, it didn't seem worth it to spend a whole Ascendancy point to only benefit a single aspect of our build. So I didn't think that was that good, opportunity cost wise. Nature's Boon it's good. Your magic flasks are better. Gives you more movement speed, more resistances. It's just really good. Like, I much prefer this. And our Bloodline, we're taking Lycia, again, as I mentioned, for converting Elemental to Chaos, to take advantage of our Wither scaling, and that's our Ascendancy and Bloodline. It's a really cool Bloodline. So let's actually talk about the tree. In general, tree is you're scaling life, right? That's the only stat that you care for is max hit. So whatever gives you more max hit, you want to scale that. Recovery, you have infinite recovery in combat. So you don't need to worry about recovery, you don't need block, you don't need evasion, you don't need any of that. You just want max hit. So you're scaling anything that gives you max hit. I'll talk about the Thread of Hope in a minute, but we take this wheel over here, it gives you some dot multi, but importantly, it lets you take this mastery for basically crit immunity. Really good. Suppress wheel gives you suppress. I'm taking Lucky Suppress to basically, I get like 94, 95, like a simulated suppression because of Lucky Suppress. Again, just life. It's very straightforward. Again, we take endurance charges because we are taking this wheel over here. 25% chance to gain an endurance charge when you're hit. Well, you're hitting yourself literally every server tick, so you have permanent endurance charges. So just take all the endurance charges. Frenzy charges, if you're running Blood Rage, it's a bit of extra damage, you don't have to take it. Iron Reflexes, just turn evasion into armor. We don't care for evasion at all. So just throw it towards armor. It gets scaled with Imbalance Guard. It's pretty nice. Endurance charge, we take this wheel for that. This whole setup over here is how we get our remaining 50% converted to of fire damage converted to chaos. So like these nodes give you like generic elemental resistances. This gives you some armor and life. This also gives you some fire res. I'm taking like 3 tattoos over here to basically push me to, technically I'm not at 100 yet, I'm only at 99, but that's good enough. But yeah, that's over here. Blood magic, this solves our mana, gives you more life. You don't need to worry about like casting mana or anything. Really good. Glorious Vanity, this is mandatory. You need a Glorious Vanity to have Immortal Ambition. You don't have to run this over here. You can also run it like down here, depending on the seed you get. It's nice to get like some extra suppress and life on the small nodes. It's not mandatory. It's just min-maxing at this point. Again, just life wheels over here, endurance charges, life. We're pathing all the way over to Elemental Overload. This gives you 40% more elemental damage, and this works on the poison and on the hit damage. It doesn't make sense to scale crit because crit will only affect the hit damage and not the poison damage. Elemental Overload is going to be like 40% more crit damage, hit damage and poison damage. Like, it applies to both. You're looking at as many sources of generic damage that you can get. We're taking a bunch of these, we're very starved on jewel sockets. We're running a Sublime Vision over here, so I'm just trying to grab as many jewel sockets as I can. Let's talk about the cluster over here. This is just a generic 8 passive cluster for chaos damage. Some nodes are really good, like unspeakable gifts. Explodes are fun. They're nice, and the cool thing is the explodes are chaos damage, and chaos damage that gets scaled up by your wither stacks. So the explosions are even better than usual. Um, Touch of Cruelty is really good. Just makes enemies take 10% more damage if you hinder them. Um, you can get hinder with like a single tattoo. I actually don't have it because I need the tattoos for res, and then if I tattoo another thing, I'll drop my int, so I need to figure that out. But like I told you, we're int starved, so yeah, ideally you just want to get a tattoo for that, or you can run like Tornado or something. Doesn't matter. Medium cluster, I'm running a just a flask effect duration cluster. Spike Concoction for Alchemist Genius it's really powerful. Gives you flask effect, which scales your progenesis. It scales everything. It's good. You get a medium plus jewel over here, and of course this just gives like just a bit more life. This is where I'm running the forbidden jewels for Deadeye for extra projectiles. You don't have to if you're going with like Detonate Dead, for example. You can look into like a Vitality Water's Eye. That's pretty nice. There's some good stats over there. Okay, on that note, actually, I want to mention there is a global leech mod from a Vitality Water's Eye. That alone is not enough to replace Adziri's Promise. I just want to point that out over here. That 1.2% of global leech is not good enough. You need more than that. Anyway, besides the point. Yeah, tree is very straightforward otherwise, nothing much to it. Right here I'm using a very large Thread of Hope. That grabs me like a couple of really nice nodes. I need this node to sustain my flask, so this is really nice. This one is like, you get all the stats all the time. Like you're always going to be at full life. It's so 10% suppress, 10% life, and 18% evasion that's converted to armor. And again, this is just a bit more life. So that's the tree. Very straightforward. Just use tattoos to fix any resistances or anything else you need. Yeah, very straightforward. Okay, let's talk about the POB config and other miscellaneous stuff with the POB. First thing is something I forgot to mention in the tree section. Rune graphs. There's 2 rune graphs we run, and they're both really important. The first one is Rune Graph of the Warp. The buffs expire on you 30% slower. It's nice for like shrine buffs and everything, but the debuffs on you expire 30% faster. That's really important to make the self poisons expire faster. That's the only way to actually reduce the duration of the poisons you inflict on yourself. Even if you have reduced duration of poison on yourself from like corruption implicits from jewels, for example, that does not apply to reflected self poison. Like even if you have 100% reduced duration of poison on yourself, you will still get the full duration of the reflected poison. This is the only way to actually reduce that. Or you have to reduce the duration of your outgoing poison with like, sadism, for example. That's the important thing. That's why this time rune graph is really important. You want that to make sure that your poisons drop off right before your leech falls off. So definitely get this one. The other rune graph we're running is Rune Graph of Time. Now, for any trigger build, this one's just insane. In our case, it just basically means like 20% more damage. 20% of the time when you trigger a spell, it does not consume a cooldown, and literally the next server tick when you take damage again, you trigger the spell again. Yeah, it's just 20% more damage. It's really good. Just get that. That's our rune graphs. Now let's go to the config. There might be a little bit of padding, but I'll try to explain what's here. I'll start with the Pantheons actually. Soul of Lunaris is like the best one, I think. It just gives you reduced elemental damage taken if you've been hit recently, which we have. It gives you like some physical damage reduction with nearby enemies, so when you're in a pack you get like some free physical damage reduction. Granted, it only goes up to 50 because of Imbalance Guard, but still covers a bit for the armor. Soul of Aberrath, this is really important because you want Burning Ground immunity. We have 0 fire res, so any fire damage over time, it's a problem. Ignite we take care of because we have Ignite immunity. Burning Ground is like the only other really common source of fire damage over time. Any other fire damage over time is like, it's usually you're in combat, so you have the self-poison to, counteract it. So yeah, even if you're taking more damage, you have literally dot cap regen, so like it doesn't matter. But burning ground is like something there's nothing nearby, so you'll just die to it. If you know the content you're running does not have that, you can look into like Grothkul instead if you need. That gives you like some additional PDR. That's the Pantheons. Time spent stationary, that's for this node over here. We're always considered stationary because we automatically teleport around. So we basically have that all the time, in packs at least. So that's what that is. We're always on full life. So that counts for the suppress and everything. It's really good. Frenzy charges, you have it in mapping. For single target you don't. It's up to you to take it or not. We definitely have all 6 endurance charges because we hit ourselves and we get endurance charges. We have Alchemist Genius, we are leeching life, we have flasks. Number of poisons on you. So Golden Rule also gives you 1% chaos resistance per poison on you. If I remove this, I actually don't have that much chaos res, but when you're in a pack and you're like, reflecting 1,000 poisons back on yourself, you're basically gonna have 100 poisons on you. So kind of safe to put it at 100, but anyway, that's that. We have crit recently, we have definitely been hit recently. Everything else is pretty standard. Enemy is poisoned. Wither stacks, we hit a lot, so this is pretty good uptime. Like, since we have 25% chance on hit, and we hit like 1,000,000 times, it's pretty good uptime. Technically, I don't actually have a source of hinder since I need it for resistances, but if you do, you should enable it for Touch of Cruelty. But that's basically it. Oh, I get shock, by the way, from my graphs. Where are they? This one. It creates the glowing silhouette, which creates shock round. I have one with also increased effect of non-damaging ailments, so that's what scales the shock from 15 to 21. It's not, the graphs are like, it's purely luxury. You don't, like, the actual graph doesn't matter as long as you have one with CDR. But of the ones that you can get, this one's nice for some free shock. We get sap ground from our boots, so that's also there. That's that. I'll talk about the custom mods. It's not too much. I have 5 green skills, so I'm putting 20%. I get 4% per skill, 20% increased CDR. If you have more skills, like more green skills, adjust it as you need. If you're struggling to fix CDR, that's one way to get some global CDR is by adding more green skill gems. Some other sources are like Abyss Jewels, like you can get 3% CDR on those. And yeah, it's kind of tricky to get the 52% CDR, but with the graphs, it's certainly possible. You'll have to move some skills around and figure that out, how you want to get your CDR. Room Graph for time, this roughly translates to 20% more damage. I'm just putting it at that. But yeah, that's the POB. Yeah, that's the POB. Okay, so I'm just gonna run a random just T16 map and kind of talk you through what's actually happening. Like, I'm not putting any scarabs, just easy map. Point is, there's a little bit of a learning curve to actually playing the build. I know it looks super simple to play. There's a couple of pitfalls to avoid with the build. I'll just try to explain as I go. Just make sure you get your flasks up and running at the start. So you run to a pack, you're literally just holding portal. That's it. That's all you're doing. You're just holding portal, and that's all there is to it. What happens sometimes is, let's say you're like going to a pack, right, and you see the poisons that are on you. Like, if they're not dropping fast enough and you're dying to self-poison, it's you shouldn't be. There's something that you've missed. That it's a fixable issue. Make sure you have like good uptime on your series promise, and yeah, just make sure that's all fine. In fact, let me try to show you, like, let's say I take off a series, right? Now I have no source of leech. The only source of leech I have is from my flask mod, and you can see immediately I get hit, I trigger a spell, it poisons the enemy, reflects it back onto me, and I just die immediately. Like, you will die to the self-poison. Let me show you that again, actually. Like, I do this, I kill the monster, but then my poisons don't drop off fast enough. like right there. Like the leech, the self-damage leech was not good enough. Now the thing is, what you can do is, let's say for some reason you notice that your poisons are, they're not falling off before the leech falls off, right? What you can do after like you kill like a pack or a monster, just tap portal once or twice. That gives you like a little bit of the self leech, and that gives you some leeway till your poisons fall off. So like that's something. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where like you're low on health and you need some regen, just tap portal once or twice. That'll trigger the sublime vision and get you back up to full. So you have that as well. I am not sure what I died there for, but let's see. That could have been me not having. I want to show you, like, I'm not editing this, like you guys should see like how you die. You can die with this build. The kryptonite for this build, the single biggest weakness for this build defensively, is fire damage. You have like in my setup, I have like respectable fizz maxed. I have like 20k maxed for like an auto bomber. That's really good. But the thing is, 20k fire hit, max fire hit, it's a little dicey. That's not great. You can and will die to big fire hits, which is why, like, if you see something really telegraphed, like those big fireballs from the breach guys, or like the big ground explosions, just make sure you get out of the way for those. And very important, avoid Fizz's extra fire. Fizz's extra fire, like that single bot, is extremely deadly because you take both fire and Fizz as just fire damage, as Fizz damage. So armor is not good at mitigating like big hits. It's better for smaller hits, and besides you have an upper limit on how much damage you can mitigate anyway. So avoid that mod as much as possible. Kind of sucks for Simulacrum because like this build mechanically is so chill for Simulacrum because you're literally just holding right click and then you're just that's it, you're just holding right click and it's brilliant Simulacrum. Except later rounds, if you run into the Fizz's extra fire, it's fine, it's doable. It's just you have to be a little careful. But that's basically the build. Be careful about like just don't hold down portal when there's nothing nearby because you have self damage, right? Be careful about that. Besides that, like that's the build. It's pretty straightforward. Like the playing is pretty straightforward. If you find yourself dying to reflected self poison, check you might have taken a no leech map mod, or maybe you just got unlucky and the mob itself had no leech. That's one way to die. What else? Yeah, I'm just gonna kill this boss. But yeah, I mean, playstyle, it's simple. That's all there is to it. It's like the chillest build you can think of to play. Yeah, watch out for boss immunity phases as well. Sometimes like you don't realize they've gone into immunity, and then you just keep holding portal, and then you just die from your self damage. Like that's something that can happen. Just when you start playing this build, just be prepared to take a couple of deaths while you learn like the intricacies. It's a very delicate build in that sense. You can mess up things pretty easily, and moving a few things around here and there, it messes it up. Just be careful, but it's really fun once you got it set up properly. And yeah, that hopefully gives you an idea of what the build actually looks like in gameplay. So I want to conclude the video and the guide with my thoughts on the build, how it came about, and just my thoughts on Path of Exile as a game as a whole. This is a weird build, right? This build should not exist, but it does. Here we are. It does. It exists. It works. All because of like one simple, innocuous interaction. Granted, it probably is unintended, but you take this one little interaction of portal canceling your animation because of the ring, and you take that one interaction and you build, well, what you see. Now, that's the beauty of Path of Exile. There's no other game where you can just, take like a little thing like this and then turn it into what you see. Like, I'm telling you, nobody at Grinding Gear Games ever thought you could make Portal into like a viable skill. and yet here we are. This is a build that exists in sheer defiance of how the game is intended to be played. Like, you know, when a game developer makes a game, they intend for it to be played in a certain way. This goes in the face of all of that. This completely breaks anything what the developer intended the way for you to play the game. But that's kind of the beauty of it. In a way, I see Path of Exile as it's not a PvE game or a PvP game. In a way, it's kind of like a developer versus community kind of game. There's this huge sandbox where you have all these tools, all these interactions, all these mechanics, and it's kind of on the community to kind of figure out how to break it. And it's almost like an arms race between the developers and the community on like how to actually, you know, make stuff happen. That's kind of the beauty of it. Like, I will say this build, I don't even want to say it's my own build. There's so much research done by the rest of the community that I took on, and I figured, like, I worked on that. Like, all the shotgunning mechanics, for example, yeah, sure, I tested it, but I only knew about testing it because of other people. The Tainted Pack video by Sticky Jim, that's how I learned how to actually use this thing. It's a community effort. And that's kind of what I like so much about Path of Exile. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, next league they're gonna patch this out. I'm pretty sure they will. It's a bug, right? And I'm not fooling anyone. It's a bug. I hope they don't, but they will. But something else is gonna show up. Like, there's gonna be something else that's broken. That's something someone figures out, and then we make something out of that. That happens all the time. Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1. And funny thing, my last Path of Exile 2 video, the one with like 130 totems, yeah, they patched that in like a week. The middle of the league, they patched it out before I could drop my guide. But anyway, besides the point, this build has been such a joy to craft. It was such a fun puzzle to figure out. This kind of stuff is why I play this game. Like, that's the fun of Path of Exile for me. Like, for me, it's not about the currency. It's not even about all of that. It's about figuring stuff out like this. Yeah, that's my conclusion / yeah. Yeah, that's it. I hope you guys try out this build. Probably won't be there next league. So good luck, have fun, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.